Okay, we are live. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the 4 o'clock session at Confirm NYC. This is the IG Maturity Index Report, Take 2, and what's on the horizon for ARMA, featuring Ann Snyder and Jason Stearns. I'm going to bring up Ann and Jason in just 1 minute. Before then, I just want to take a quick opportunity to thank our sponsor for this session. Our sponsor is iManage. And those of you that don't know, iManage is the company that's dedicated to making knowledge work. Its intelligent, cloud-enabled, secure knowledge work platform enables organizations to uncover and activate the knowledge that exists inside of their business content and communications. They've got advanced AI and powerful document and email management to create connections across data, systems, and people, while leveraging the context of organizational content to fuel those deep insights and inform business decisions and collaboration. So we ask that you please check out iManage in the sponsor links in this session and just in our general sponsors section, and feel free to reach out to them to find out more about what they do. Okay, I'm going to bring up our speakers now. We'll do it one by one. We'll start with Ann. Hi, Ann.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So Ann Snyder, those of you that don't know, if you've been hiding under a rock or what, but Ann is ARMA International's Content and Education Director. And immediately prior to joining ARMA, she served as Senior Manager of Information Governance at a biotech company. She's got a ton of experience with data remediation, data mining, analytics, e-discovery, IG process building, technology. She does it all. And we're very happy that to have Ann here today. And she's going to be co-presenting along with our friend Jason Stearns. Jason C. Stearns is president of ARMA International, president of the board of directors, serving on the board since 2017. Previously, he served as chair of the IGP board of directors, and he's a former president of right here, ARMA Metro New York City. And he was also the information governance program manager at Citadel. Both Ann and Jason are dear friends of mine personally and of the chapter, and we are blessed to have them here. And I'm just going to keep quiet now and take it away, guys.
I just want to say I'm really thank you so much for that introduction, Gene, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you at the Confirm conference today, and I desperately wish that we could be there in person, and I look for the time that we can see each other face to face again, hopefully really soon. I'm over here in Pennsylvania, and I miss my before 2020 fairly frequent excursions up to NYC. So I miss all of you. I miss the city, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
And
Jason?
even though many of you are joining us from home, I'm actually in the office today, as you can tell by my exciting background, my beige white walls, and the corner of a whiteboard that I can show you. But it's good to see everyone and be chatting with you. And I second everything Ann says about hoping to see everyone in person soon. It's been quite the adjustment. Matter of fact, the last in-person conference I went to was the New York City conference last year. So.
All right. Well, Jason and I are here to talk to you today about the IG Maturity Index and what's on the horizon for ARMA in the near term and long term, and specifically with respect to content and other educational programming. But most importantly, we're going to talk to you about how you can get involved. We all want a role in shaping the content and making the best educational programming for ARMA and our members, and there's a lot that you can do, and we are anxious to work with the subject matter experts who are part of our membership. So we'll talk about that when we get to the end. So today we're going to focus for the first bits on the IG Maturity Index survey and the index report that's coming out in the near term. We'll look at the objectives, the design and methodology that we used to build out the survey and the index, including its relationship to the information governance implementation model, the IGIM, the maturity scale that we used that should look familiar to most of the ARMA folks on this call. And then we'll look into the results and analysis a bit. Now, this is a hard format to go through, data, it's a lot to digest. So
it's
I've included.
Exciting.
Well, I think it's exciting. I mean, I spend time on the weekends digesting this, and so I enjoy it, and I think it's incredibly useful for you.
It is useful.
But it's hard to digest it all in one sitting. It's hard to, also, we know it's 4 o'clock and you have a cocktail hour that's going to be starting. So I've included the information. You can get a copy of all of this information in detail, including the questions that were asked in the IG Maturity Index report, last year's report, and we have another one coming out in the near term at the end of this month, beginning of April as well. So, just feel free to just get the highlights, get the general trends, and we'll let you digest it a little bit more on your own when you're fresh in the day and you have a strong cup of coffee. We're going to look then at just sort of highlights and conclusions, and then we'll turn to sort of next steps, what's on the horizon for ARMA in terms of content and educational programming, again, how you can be involved, and then we want to open it up for some Q&A. You have Jason here, you have me here from the content and education side. This is a chance to, ask some questions of us. If we don't get to everything, please, I'm always available to take a phone call, take an email, set up time to talk to you, and more than happy to share with you what my thoughts are on the direction program is going, and also hear your thoughts, most importantly. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I am 100% sure Jason has said something very similar on almost every email that he has sent out. So
yes, actually I have.
So take
take
advantage of that.
Come in already, so really quick. Let me address one. One, I was asked to show my shoes and not disappoint because I have this reputation for my flashy shoes. Unfortunately, I will have to disappoint today because I had to bike to the office today, and I had to wear sensible shoes for bicycling into work, even if it was only 21 degrees when I left the house this morning. And the other part, I'll phrase a little bit differently. So the results that we're going to share with you today are from the results of you, the members of ARMA. And if you want better results and you want more detail and year-over-year trends, we need you to participate in these types of surveys when they occur. The first year of the survey, we had a good level of participation. 2020 being what it was a little bit different. We'll speak to some of that in a minute. But every time you see one of these opportunities to, share some insight, please do, because it not only, benefits you by participating and being able to share, but it benefits the larger community and the industry as a whole, so we understand how we're doing.
I would show my shoes, but I'm concerned about knocking down this screen. But I am wearing 5-toed shoes, so
cool.
they're not very. It looks like a little foot, a little hand.
My sparkly loafers don't do well on bicycle pedals.
So to get back to the the index. So the IG Maturity Index was meant to be a data-driven point-in-time measure of IG program maturity. It was also meant to be a reference point, sort of a year-over-year comparison of IG program maturity and progress. It was also intended to be a benchmark, a point against which you could compare your IG program and see how you're doing against others in the industry. Now, as Jason noted, we need you to participate. We don't have a data pool yet that allows me to meaningfully parse the data and say, well, if you're, a pharma company, I can compare you to a similar pharma company of similar size. I don't have enough data yet to parse it in that way, but that's what we're hoping to do in the near term, in the next over the next couple of years. So help us participate, and then we can get those data points and then get that meaningful comparison out there for you. It was also meant to be an aid in effective IG program implementation. And that's why we tied it to the IG implementation model and IG IM aligned resources. And we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about what we have in store and what we have on the horizon for ARMA. So let's go to its just relationship to this IG implementation model. Some of you have probably seen this before. It's actually a model that's been around in one version or another for I think 8 years, Jason. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering that, but I think that's the right number. So it's been around for a while. It's had a cosmetic enhancement last year to make the colors a little bit, more streamlined. But I think its longevity is a testament to its utility, I think. So why another model? Well, the IGIM offers a functional, air quoting, approach to IG. And it explores the elements with respect to each of these 7 key areas that you see outlined here. I'm not going to read them off to you. that are necessary for implementing an effective IG program. And I think that's the key word there, implementation. So this is about doing IG, setting up an effective IG program. It's not just about a snapshot, although the survey is a snapshot, a point in time.
Yeah, what's great about the model and the detailed version that's on the next slide, and Anna and I were talking about this as we were preparing about what we wanted to speak about, is, everyone processes information differently, and the presentation you're going to give to your steering committee or your senior management to try and get them to buy into, developing an IG program is going to be very different than, the members of that committee who are going to make IG happen. So the meeting with the C-suite might be, that first slide, and then the meeting with the members of the steering group and the working teams and everyone else who's going to be involved in the actual implementation is probably going to want to have the level of detail that you see on this slide. And then you can dig in even further, and we even have more detail in other resources. And a little sneak peek, I'm going to see a little bit of Ann Slender. She said, how are we aligning this to future resources? Hint, hint. This is going to look a lot like the future of the IGP certification in the not so distant future. We're doing a lot of work in that area already.
And also, I mean, we already have resources that exist that are aligned to this. So the essentials, if anyone's taken the essentials of IG course, that is directly tied to this as well. So what the IG maturity index does is, first, it is aligned with this, and it assesses IG program maturity overall. So your overall IG program maturity, and then with respect to each of these 7 areas. And as Jason noted, there's more granularity in each of these, but you can also imagine how you could drill down even further into each of these. We haven't done that graphically yet, but that's to come. And so the reason we align the IG maturity index to the IGIM is that it allows professionals to take a unified implementation approach to improving their IG program. So by targeting, first assessing by taking the survey, by participating in the index, by assessing the areas where their IG programs are deficient, they can focus their resources and efforts on improving those areas in particular. And then again, because we're building out resources that are aligned with each of these areas, you can go to those resources that are going to be most useful to filling the existing gaps in your program. Now, I want to go to the next, I'm going to turn this over to Jason for a second. So we used a common maturity, set of maturity levels, which should look familiar to most ARMA folks. Jason, over to you on this one.
Yeah, so as Ann says, this should look very familiar to you if you've ever been one of the devotees of the principles. So the ARMA's generally accepted record-keeping principles maturity model used a similar 5-point structure. The categories have similar names. How it lines up to the IGIM is a little bit different, but the basic concepts are the same. First of all, getting to a level 4, a level 5 across the board in all the areas that you want to assess may not be necessary based on the size of your organization, your industry, your risk tolerance. In some cases, it may not even be possible because some of the different areas of maturity actually compete against one another. Fully locking down things for privacy may inhibit your ability to do full data sharing. Also understanding that, a level 3 level, that essential, well, that's a good place to be. That means you've got the basics covered. You're doing what you need to do. Doesn't necessarily mean you're being super proactive just yet. You may still find yourselves, caught flat-footed now and then, having to react to a situation rather than getting out ahead of it. But that's not always a bad place to be. It's certainly better than, it doesn't even exist or you're still building it out. But ultimately, you want to see most of your assessments coming down around the 4 level, 5 in some areas, but 3 is still a good place to start out at.
And I think so again, it's important to not see 3 as deficient. Again, you're in a reactive state, but you can see in that generic description, you're getting the basic requirements. If you think about, making dinner for the family, you maybe don't have the weekly plan of what's coming up for dinner each day, but nobody's mal or undernourished. Level 5 is, everyone's eating bespoke, artisanal, grass-fed, etc., stuff. And so it's it's a different level of maturity, but you're getting the basics done. So you'll see later we do group levels 3, 4, and 5 as kind of, you're getting the job done, versus the ones where levels 2 and 1, which we consider in the deficient zone.
Yeah, sticking with the food analogy, think Martha Stewart versus boxed mac and cheese.
All right. So survey, either one of those would be good. Survey delivery and the data analysis. So the first survey debuted in 2019 at ARMA InfoCon, when we were still going out there and seeing each other. And then we extended it as our point in time. That it extended from the conference to the end of the year. We again targeted IG professionals. We had a lot of people from the conference actually completing the survey. The 2020 survey, again, was distributed at ARMA 2020, the InfoCon 2020, but again, we were virtual. So 2020 was a little bit different, and the results are, we have fewer respondents, and we're in the process of parsing all of the results, and we'll let you know what we see. But we are going to see, obviously, a sample set that is skewed somewhat, given the volume of people who participated, and also the fact that we're all responding to 2020. We did make the decision to close it at the end of the year as the other one, because we wanted to have this be a truly point in time survey. And it's an aberration potentially, but 2020 was an aberration as well. So it's reflecting with fidelity the strangeness that was last year. So we're going to publish those results at the end of March. That's going to be part of March 25th webinar, and then you'll have access to the full report. And that full report is really worth looking through. The stuff that we're going to gloss over quickly just because of time considerations and not making you glaze over in this presentation are in that report, including the details of the questions that we asked, how we listed each maturity level. So Jason went over the generic 5 levels. For each of the areas of the IGIM, we particularized those 5 levels for that IGIM area, and all of that detail is in there. So you could take that report and actually take the survey, assess your organization in real time if you wanted to. And we're putting together some resources in the near term that would be like just sort of checklists, and eventually some of that will be available in a more interactive online format. But right now, you could take the survey yourself and assess your program if you haven't done that already. And then the question is, why didn't you take my survey? So it's my baby. So anyway, seriously, we do want you to participate. It's essential. Everyone, that's the number one thing people ask me for, other than some basic resources like retention schedules and specifics of how to execute a part of a program, is data. People want this kind of data, and we can only get it if our people participate in the collection of it.
So a little history on our ability to try and produce these kind of metrics. If you recall way back to 2007, 2008 timeframe, one of the reasons that the Cobalt Award was originally launched was to gather metrics and data about how organizations were performing, and then actually hold up the organization that is the one that was deserving of the award. And I know my organization at the time, we participated because we were really more interested in those metrics. Future iterations of that award were then based off of the principles maturity model. And now you see us evolving more into the information governance space. And now we've got a similar assessment model, but now looking at much more granular aspects of what was looked at perhaps in the past. But going back to Anne's comment, you got to participate in her survey if you want to get the results that you can then use to assess your organization, and then hold yourselves up and say to your management, hey, this is where we're doing well, this is where we're lacking, this is how we were able to make those determinations.
Just related to all of this, we have done everything we can to make this accessible to you. These are licensed. We'll have links to this at the end. These are Creative Commons licensed, so that you can access the graphics and put them into presentations and use them. They're already formatted and ready for you, and we'll do that for this year's data as well. So in terms of, let's just start diving into the results and analysis. We did break down the respondents by organization size. As you can see here, we're roughly divided into a universe of what we call large organizations, which we said is 1,000 and above, and anything that's small and mid-size, which we're saying is a 999 and below. We did add in this year's survey some additional parsing of that 1,000 and above. The utility of that parsing remains to be seen, given that we had a slightly smaller respondent pool. Again, our respondent pool is great, but we need it to be bigger so I can parse this data a little bit more for people and allow them to do more meaningful comparisons in a valid way. We, of course, did an assessment of the roles that were represented. Not surprisingly, information management, information governance, and records management had more representation. Not surprising, again, given our audience. And then we did look at the industries. We did adjust these a little bit, but I think we've just added one or two this year, but generally they match up with last year's results as well. Does anyone have any questions yet?
So far, we're good.
All right. So the first of the 7 areas of the IGIM on which we assess maturity is the steering committee. And whoops, sorry, I went too far. So don't get hung up on that term steering committee. This basically represents the people aspect of your organization. We had to pick a term in the model to represent that. So this is the organization's IG leadership team. And as you can see in the infographic in the upper right, these, it should have broad representation and someone from each of the interests enumerated in that infographic, and potentially more depending on how your organization is structured. Now, think of those as roles and not specific people. There might be a person who's playing multiple roles, spanning across the areas. And you can see also that the IG governance role is a role that spans all of those other professionals, and the idea is that it's connected to the idea that IG is meant to be a coordinating strategic function for all of your organization's information. It's not necessarily an authority or a reporting structure, but it's representative of that.
Yeah, and depending on your organization, again, not only is the term committee maybe the term you're using or not, but the level of participation you have may vary as well. If you're in the very beginning stages of setting up your information governance program, you may not be regularly engaging with the business just yet. You might still be figuring out, what does your framework look like? Who are the members that are going to be involved? Who's a voting member for project work? And then you engage in the business as those structures get a bit more established. Or you may do it the other way around. It may be the business that's driving your information governance initiatives at the firm from the very start, maybe less of a compliance issue. I think that depends in large part around your market sector and what you're doing. In the financial services world, where I've spent my entire career, it's a very much a compliance-driven function. Very heavily regulated sector, getting it right, getting the various aspects of information management, whether it's record keeping, privacy, or data security, or even on the discovery side of things, getting that right is really the primary driver. And the rest of it fits into that as we get those structures more firmed up.
So if you were evaluating your organization's IG maturity with respect to this area, you might ask yourself questions like, does your organization have a formal or informal body? Does it meet on a regular basis? Are all of those interests represented on that committee or group or whatever your organization is calling it? And then things like, do they have the authority? Are they empowered to make the decisions that they need to are they empowered to make IG decisions in the organization? So we worked all of those types of considerations and others within the five-point scale. So again, Jason talked about the generic 5-point scale. We have specific ones for each of the areas of the IG Maturity Index. We asked respondents to select the maturity level that best described their organization on average with respect to this area using that 5-point scale. And this is what we found. I want to take a minute on this first graphic just because it'll sort of orient you to the rest of them, just to describe just what is on here and how we structured it. Again, it's a lot to digest, but I think if you understand what's in here, it'll help you understand the rest of the graphics, but also enable you to use the report in a more useful way. So what you can see here, you see the 5-point scale across the x-axis on the bottom here, and then to the far right, you have I don't know or can't answer. The idea is we wanted everyone to get through the entire survey, so we had some consistency. We didn't want to, lose people at different points or have different numbers, so that who had completed the survey, and that was to make the analysis and the utility of it more, just higher for you and for others in the industry. What you can see here is the gray bars represent, again, these are represented as percentages. The gray bars are percentage of total respondents. The blue bars represent the small to mid-size organizations. And then the green represent the large ones. And you can see some obvious trends that are not so shocking. Roughly, though, and this is for Gene, because Gene told me he likes bell curve distributions. A lot of them are sort of following graphically represented, and there are a lot of them that sort of follow that generic pattern. You can see that it's roughly divided into a third, and a third. So a third of the population is deficient. A third is kind of in that middle zone, doing the essentials, reactive posture, and then you have another third who are, above, a cut above, and are exceeding the basic requirements. And that pattern is generally repeated throughout the other areas of the IGIM, with some skewing, and we'll focus on highlighting that. But what do we see here? We can see that, if we look at essential and, if we group essential, proactive, and transformative, we can see that a clear majority, 62%, that's if you add these up, report that their organization's maturity level is at essential, so that level 3 or higher. And this means, that a bit fewer than 2/3 of respondents say that their organizations have at least the essentials in place when it comes to the people side of their information governance. Now that sounds great, and when I looked at this data, I was excited because it's a majority, but the glass isn't always half full. There's another side of this, which means that roughly a third of organizations are still in that deficient zone. So we see this as both something positive. We're obviously trending to getting the essentials and above handled at our organizations with respect to this element, and as well as with respect to the others. But there's still a whole chunk of us that in 2021, in this case, 2019, 2021, are still deficient, and that should be concerning. Jason, do you have anything to add on this before I move on?
No, but we do have a question.
Sure.
So for organizations that have limited resources to dedicate to a formal information governance committee, mainly around staff time concerns, are there any ideas on how to do a higher level approach? Maybe a committee that can be engaged via email or email the team for specific issues. So I've got a couple ideas in this one. One, what I've actually implemented, and one of which I'm trying to work with in this wonderful new environment where everything's virtual these days. So in one organization I'm aware of, what they had done is come up with almost like a decision tree structure, so that whenever the business needed to engage with the IG working group, either because they wanted to launch something new or there was a new initiative, there was a basics document that walked them through everything that they needed to have and be prepared to address before they were ready to take their idea to the IG governance committee. That way, those meetings were much, much more efficient and could happen in a far less frequent cadence. In the more virtual situation we find ourselves today, it may be someone like, in my current role, I'm the IG program manager. It may be something that everything comes to me, and then I triage things and then farm them out to the other members of what would be the committee if it met on a regular basis, so that we get the input of all the key stakeholders, but there's not a formal meeting that has to be presented to. And then maybe that group gets together on an as-needed basis to address any questions or issues that come up. I think those are two different approaches that could work. And I think those could work, independent of the size of your organization.
And it's not the particulars, that you have to meet this many times and this, with this regularity. It's, are you meeting enough times to get the job done for your organization? So this has to be tailored to your organization, the working styles, what resources are actually available to you. This is not, again, it's not one size, IG is not one size fits all. It has to be tailored to your specific organization. What we did note on this thing, this parameter, was that this tended to be one of the less mature areas for organizations. Again, we have like 62.7%. We'll look at this at the end, where you can see a comparison of the maturity parameters next to one another, but this one was one where we were slightly less mature than some of the others. Why that is, we weren't 100% clear, and that we're hoping to dig into that a little bit in upcoming years. So the next one here is authorities, and again, I'm going to whip through these a little bit faster just in the interest of time. So authorities are the elements that serves kind of as the guide rails for your organization's IG efforts. Roughly, these are sort of the rules of the road, both internal ones, your risk tolerance, your organizational culture, those often get forgotten, but also regulations, laws, the things that you have to abide by, as well as external things like best practices and industry standards. So if you're evaluating your organization with respect to this area, you'd look at things like, your organization's legal and regulatory compliance and business needs clearly understood. Are they documented? Are they being followed? Have appropriate standards and best practices been identified? Are they understood? What about your organization's culture and risk tolerance? Are you incorporating those kinds of things into your decision making? And are you updating these things on a regular basis? So what you can see here is, again, it's following a very similar trend. What's interesting on this one, though, the total on the essentials, proactive, and transformative, this is 72%, and that means that nearly 3/4 of respondents, again, it's higher than the previous one, which was like 62%, think that their organizations have at least the essentials in place. So this one, the understanding of what the rules of the road are, is slightly better than having the right people in place. Do you have anything to add on this one before I move to the next one?
No, I think this is one area where historically records managers have done well, so it's not surprising that as records programs mature into IG programs, that this is also an area that we're performing well in.
Mm-hmm. So the next one is processes. So processes are what ensure consistency, essentially, in your organization's IG programs. These are metrics, policies, procedures, the rules, roles, and benchmarking. So this tool that we're looking at, I didn't advance, I apologize. This program that we're talking about here, the IG Maturity Index, is one of those kinds of things. It's an external benchmark that you can use to assess the current state of your program. So if you were looking at this, you would, if you were assessing your organization on this parameter, you'd want to know, do we understand our policies and procedures? Are they clearly defined? Are they being followed? You'll want to, check some of those things through, different accountability measures. Are metrics being used, or benchmarking like this maturity index, to measure the program progress and actually inform decision making? So that's what this one is about. You can see just even by these trend lines that it's skewing a little bit to the left here. It's a little bit less mature than the one that we just looked at, but still we have a clear majority. 64.4% of respondents report that they were at a level 3 or above. So that, again, roughly 2/3 think that they are doing at least the essentials or better when it comes to ensuring consistency in their IG program. Again, though, not to be too Pollyannish, we still have, greater than 1/4 of the population, roughly a third, who are still ranking themselves as deficient.
I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that. There's been a lot of talk about metrics and the importance of metrics over the last few years, and I think a lot of us are still figuring out what are the right metrics to report on in our organization. There's also been a real shift in how policies are developed and how they should be developed. ARMA did a whole series on this. If you haven't checked it out, you really should. But we've all seen that policy that reads like a regulation, or that reads like a legal brief, and those just really aren't acceptable anymore. Or you've written a policy that you actually can enforce or follow, and those are those have to go away too. So as we look at those changes in just those two aspects of this area, it's not surprising to see that this is a little behind where we may expect it.
Mm-hmm. The next area, capabilities, is actually one where the maturity skewed a little bit more mature. We have the total of it for the essentials, proactive, and transformational was 72%. And this isn't shocking to me, given that what we see here, this is stuff that's sort of squarely within the wheelhouse of information governance and records and information management. If you were assessing your organization's program with respect to this, again, these are capabilities that reflect the things that help guide your information through your organization. And that's how I think about it, and guide them through the information life cycle. If you were looking at the maturity of your organization in this parameter, you'd ask questions like, does the correct information, get to the right hands at the right time and in the form that it's needed? Is the information protected throughout its entire life cycle? And you see both protection and privacy. Can you find it? You see search is spanning the entire information life cycle, and I'm referring to the image in the upper right hand corner. And is a consistent life cycle being applied to all of your organization's information, regardless of the format and location? Again, this one, given that it is sort of squarely within our wheelhouse, not surprisingly, we had 72% of respondents saying that their organizations were at level 3 or higher. Structures was another one. I'm sorry, this one skewed a little bit lower in terms of maturity. And this is, structures is basically referring to the building blocks of your organizational information. So things like information architecture, taxonomy, and metadata. This is one that I actually would have, if I had guessed, would have thought was one that we would do well on, because again, I think taxonomy and metadata and those kinds of things are within our wheelhouse. I think potentially one of the reasons why organizations or respondents scored their organizations a little bit lower on this one was because there are, isolated pockets of, good metadata, good taxonomy that don't often crosstalk. That's what I've at least seen in organizations that I've worked for and clients I've worked with. So you have great nuggets of excellent work that just don't communicate across the organization. So siloing is not anything new, and I think we may be seeing it here. I don't know that for sure. That's a bit of speculation. And as we dive in deeper to these areas over the course of the next couple of years, we'll try to elucidate what specifically is the problem that's underlying this. So what we saw here is organizations tended, like I said, to skew a little bit less mature in this area. So only 62% said that they were at level 3 or above.
Yeah, if you talk to most of the individuals in your firm that got a C as part of their title or an equivalent, you start talking taxonomy and metadata, and they glaze over really quickly, or they sum it up with, well, it's the data about the data, I don't care about that. No, that's not true of all of them, but I think that's where you see pockets of success for the individuals that get it, and then as that goes out into the wilds of the rest of the firm, maybe not so much.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things too is it's one of those things that I think everyone realizes, and everyone outside of our profession realizes is important, and it seems really logical that you should have a good taxonomy so you can find things. But I think that there's an oversimplification sometimes in people's minds as to how that is accomplished, and not as much attention is given to it as should be. So I think that that's also an area that contributes to the disconnect and the lower maturity. Infrastructure was one of the top 3. So we have authorities, capabilities, and infrastructure leading the way in terms of most mature areas. And what we think about, what we mean by infrastructure in the IGIM are the technical abilities that underpin your information systems. Basically, the ability of your organization's information systems to do what you need them to do. So think about the applications and software. What's in your technology ecosystem? Is it, do you have good connectivity? And those kinds of things. You're getting good response time. So people rank this parameter a little bit higher. We had about 72%. Let me double check that. No, sorry, 74% roughly who said that they were at level 3 and above. So what you'd look at in this, if you were assessing your maturity, is, are the right applications and software in place to meet your organizational needs? Do you have the right tools within your technology environment in an integrated format, and so on? Jason, do you have anything on this before I move to the sort
I'll
of
just
summaries?
address the question that came up. Will there be
Sure.
a year-to-year comparison, and we think it will be helpful considering the differences? Yes, there will be a year-to-year comparison. I think, as Anne pointed out at the beginning, 2020 is a off year just generally in a whole bunch of ways. So I think the usefulness of comparing 2020 to prior years or future years will depend on how this assessment continues to grow and develop over time.
Yeah, and again, we're in this sort of I spent a lot of time recently looking at the data. Again, we're a little bit lower on the data points, but again, it's we still have a good number of respondents. That's down from last year, again, just because of the practicality of executing it, I think, during the virtual conference, and hopefully we'll get those numbers up this year. But the utility, so I'm not 100% sure yet how it's going to skew in terms of maturity. And again, we have to think of this year as some kind of an aberration, no matter what those results say, because we know people were working very, very differently and under strange conditions. So this is the last one. It's just overall IG program maturity. I won't belabor this. It's the same kind of general trend that we're seeing. The more mature organizations the larger organizations are slightly more mature than the smaller organizations. And we have, again, generally this a third, and a third, with roughly 2/3 saying that they are at essential or above. Now, this last bit, and again, all of these graphics are available for you to use in a nice downloadable format. They're available in the IG Maturity Index report, and we'll have, again, the year-over-year ones this year. This graphic is worth digging into. There's a lot of information here that allows you to just see a ton about how these the maturity across these 7 parameters really play out. So basically, you see that like this outer circle here is overall program maturity for like all of the organizations. This is the total, and then we have it as you go deeper into the circle, the concentric circles. We have the large organizations and then the small ones, so you can get a good comparison, seeing how across each of these parameters maturity compares. And I see we're running out of time, so this just highlights the ones that are more mature across of the 7 parameters, which ones are more mature, and these are the ones which tend to be a little bit more deficient. So these are highlights and conclusions, and I touched on those already. Clear majority are at essentials or better for all of the parameters, the 7 of the IGIM, as well as overall program maturity. A substantial portion are still deficient, and that's why this should be somewhat of a call to action. If you fall in that group, it's 2021. There's no excuse any longer for not getting the job done. We saw, again, more mature in authorities, capabilities, and infrastructure. And again, large organizations are generally more mature than small and mid-sized ones. So what's next on the horizon for ARMA? Use the report and infographics in the way that we've been discussing. So assess your own organization, compare it, where do you stand? We are also now building out IGIM targeted resources. So Jason already mentioned this. We are aligning the IGP with the IGIM. We already have other resources out there. The essentials of IG is already mostly aligned, I guess, to the IGIM, and we're building out other resources. So you can find where your organization stands, identify deficiencies, the direction that you want to go, and then go and get those resources easily by using this sort of targeted, aligned approach to the resources that we have available to you at ARMA. The graphics and report are available for the previous report, and the 2021 results are coming soon. You can get them here at these links. What's on the horizon right now? What are we working on? We have recently launched on the February 25th, we launched our members only webinar series. We have 3 more of those coming up. We have Anne Gore at the beginning of April, topic to be determined, but she's always fantastic. We have
Maybe Anne
Lewis.
can make some news and tell us the topic today in the chat.
Is Ann here? Okay, great. So we've talked about two different extremes of topics for Ann's presentation. We have Louis Eisen coming up in June, and in September, and Andrea Dombra is going to speak about the impact of good IG on cyber breach and minimizing the damage from cyber breach. We're also looking for your input in content. So we have launched a request, a call for volunteers. Most immediately, we need people to help us with ARMA InfoCon, this year's conference. First up is session selection. So if you'd like to have a role in helping shape what is being presented at the conference, we could use your help in assessing the sessions. We're also working with people to do session curation. So if you've done the conference in the past, you know that we take the original presentation, the rough out of the PowerPoints and the outlines, and we work with the speakers to polish that. So by the time conference comes around, the speaker is, in his or her best form, polished, and that the materials are better for our members. And I think that process is really meaningful and helpful to everyone. Could use your help also in articles. What you'd like to see, what you're interested in, and keeping your eyes and ears open for interesting stories that you'd like us to be covering. And then we're going to be expanding to some other opportunities as well. I see Angor has replied in the chat, but I can't see it in the view that I have.
It's either going to be the intersection of cybersecurity and privacy and IG, or pitching an IG program.
Okay.
Either will be fabulous because Anne's a great presenter and can talk to either of those topics in exquisite detail.
So
and
in terms of
jump on the volunteer opportunities thing, we're going to have a lot more volunteer opportunities coming up in the not so distant future and off into the future, and we're really trying to shift more and more things to get the engagement of our members. This is your association, after all. I think those of you who have seen our values statement, the values task force that helped create that statement is a prime example of the type of things we'd like to do in the future. Some of them will be short one-offs, and some of them will be longer commitments based on your ability to help support the association.
And speaking of our association, I want to thank you both for delivering this. This is incredibly valuable, data sets and assets that we could use as members of ARMA. Those of you who are watching this who are not members of ARMA, I don't know what you're thinking. It's time to join ARMA. But whether you're a member or not, this was a remarkably informative session, and we thank you both so much. And also, just so everybody remembers, we're not through with the day yet. Go grab a beverage. You've got 14 minutes now, and join us for the networking hour, followed by the trivia game at 5 o'clock. Jason and Ann, thank you guys so much. Also, I just want to give another shout out to our sponsor, iManage. This would not have been possible without iManage's support and the support of all of our sponsors. And please check out our sponsor page and show them some love, ask some questions, and get out there and network. And thank you guys. Thank you for watching.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.